Thus the heavens and the earth were created. Since on the seventh day God was finished with the work he had been doing, he rested on the seventh day from all the work he had undertaken. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because in it he rested from all the work that had been done in creation. Now, I think that you can look at the Holy Father's encyclical, much like this work of God, this creation. The first section of the first whole part of that encyclical is about all of creation and looking at it from a very objective standpoint with facts and figures and all kinds of information about creation. Then he comes to that part that I gave you, and I think it can be likened to the seventh day. The Holy Father now is resting from the work he has completed. And he is going to talk about a sacred day, the sacred day of rest that we have as Christians, a rest from compulsions and work, never stopping, never looking at creation, never looking at this whole environment that we live in. So he talks about the section that he calls it peace and joy. And he says that the Christian life is lived prophetically and contemplatively, which is very, very interesting. The Holy Father is a contemplative, and he gives us an idea, really, truly, what a contemplative lifestyle entails. And the first characteristic is sobriety and humility, free from all the drives and things that overcome us with overwhelming desires, overwhelming being driven by all kinds of activity, all kinds of every obsession and compulsion that you can think of is what the Holy Father is talking about. And he says that the Christian life is sober. So the chief characteristic now that he's describing is, in this part of the encyclical, he's talking about the person's experience, your experience with creation. And it's because you are sober and because you have a contemplative lifestyle, you can look at what is there and appreciate every little thing that is there in creation. And you can appreciate it and look at it carefully. And from there, he talks about the person going into relationship with others, going into the civic and political life. And he says that this is community. Once you leave your own self and go out into some kind of a relationship with others, you have entered into the community. And he talks about the beauty of community and cultivating friendship, cultivating relationship with other people, the joy of this, and the deep religious experience of these relationships Now he says most of us won't be going into politics, but that's the basis of politics is from this relationship with others. We have a relationship with others. And then he talks about the sacraments, that the whole of creation is sacramental. Everything that you and I see in this creation is a sacramental. It in some way contains within itself the grace of God, to the point where he starts quoting St. John of the Cross, and a Muslim mystic, Ali al-Awami, who says that God is in everything. Now, the Pope references this, the writings of this man, but first he says himself, this is not a quote from this Sunni, this is himself talking. He says, looking at a leaf, looking at a mountain stream, looking at anything in nature is a mystical experience because it connects you with God. And then he quotes St. John of the Cross because he says that these experiences that you have of looking at a mountain or a stream or anything in creation, anything beautiful in creation, is the experience of God, the awe that you experience in this looking at nature, is the experience of God. He says that, and he quotes John of the Cross, as saying in his spiritual canticle, St. John of the Cross says, the mountain is to me, and the valleys are to me God. Now, of course, we know that the mountain is not God, and the valley is not God. But our experience that God gives us when we look at the mountain or the valley or the leaf or anything in nature, that experience is the experience of God for us. For us as human beings, the experience of God comes through the sacrament of nature, of all that is created. Now, when we think of this, well, surely, when you are in prayer, and in some way God communicates with you, and you experience the peace of prayer, and the tremendous expansion of your soul, is that any different than looking at the ocean, looking at a mountain, looking at a leaf? You know, we've got a house full of mystics here, you know, and Father Gabriel loves to go into the woods, and he can look at a leaf, and he goes bananas. I mean, he loves a leaf, and he'll bring it home, and he'll press it, and he'll show it to you. Oh, look at this leaf. He sees something more than a leaf. He experiences something more than a leaf. He experiences awe. Well, the experience of awe is the experience of God, who gives us the experience as awe. and that's sacramental. That's God using created world to give us grace. Then the Pope talks about, I hate to leave this section about John of the Cross, because, and the Pope quoting St. John of the Cross, remember he's a Spaniard, and he speaks the Spaniard, he grew up in Argentina. Of course his origins are Italian, but he's most familiar with the Spanish. And so the Spanish mystics, you can see that they have influenced this man. And they tell me that in Spain, the kids in school who are learning Spanish have to learn the Canticle of St. John of the Cross, because it's the most perfect, beautiful Spanish. Now, the Pope is writing about this, so therefore he knows something about the Spanish mystics. And I think he showed us that he was a contemplative, a mystic, while he was here on his visit this past week. I don't know if you noticed, but when he said Mass, he stayed longer raising the host and the chalice than anyone I have ever seen. I mean, most priests, the rubric say you raise the chalice, you show it to the faithful, then you put it down. But the Holy Father raised the chalice and stayed there for a good, maybe even 30 seconds. He just kept it up there. And the same with the host. He's a very prayerful man. When he entered the church and they took him to the Blessed Sacrament for a visit to the Blessed Sacrament, most liturgical moments before the Blessed Sacrament in this liturgical function of a bishop entering a church and visiting the Blessed Sacrament, they just stay for a few moments. But Francis stayed for more than a few moments. And when he went to that church, it was told that it was going to be visit to a poor soup kitchen or something like that. But anyway, before he went there to visit the poor, he went into this church, and they took him to an altar dedicated to the Blessed Mother. Well, usually when these functions happen, the prelate is brought to this altar and stays for 2 or 3 seconds. But Francis stayed there, and stayed there, and stayed there, and nobody could get him to move, you know. This man is at rest. He is sober. He is contemplative. And he showed us that in his visit. And of course, he's showing it to us here. How many encyclicals have you read that talk about contemplative lifestyle? I don't think there are very many. And then for him to talk about the experience of God and to talk about mysticism, it's rare. So this part of this encyclical is very, very precious. I told you last month, when you get to this section, he just soared. It's almost like an eagle. He just took off. And you've had a chance maybe to look at it and to see what I was talking about. He just soars with this beautiful poetic imagery and talks about creation and our experience of creation. Now, when he quotes this Muslim, the Muslim says that, we shouldn't be too critical of people who find their ecstasy in music and poetry. The Muslims have their own mystics, the Sufis, and the whirling dervishes, and their own treasury of mysticism. And Francis knows that, and evidently he has had contact with that. Remember, a good deal of Spain is Moorish. The Moors came up there in all the architecture, and so they left their mark on Spain, and it's in the Spanish literature. And so Francis is aware of all of this, and he's not ashamed, or you might say bashful, about talking about it. I mean, it's rare that you would find anyone, a pope, exposing himself, you might say, his own personal experience, and letting us know his experience of creation. He sees all of creation as a sacrament. How after he talks about this mystical experience and all, he talks about the Eucharist. And he says, here is the great, great sacrament of joining creation and combining, when you think we join water and flower, two fundamental elements in creation, in this creation of ours. And we join them, and they become the Word, the presence of the Word in these elements of creation. Now it's interesting that it is unleavened bread. Well, it's only recently that I learned something about leaven. Leaven is alive, and we have it in our beer. Our beer has they're twice yeastings in our beer. And they were explaining to me, and they said, well, this is alive. This beer is alive, so you can't shake the bottles, and you have to treat them very, very gently, because they could, when you open them, they will foam like a bottle of champagne, because they are alive. So it's interesting that Jesus, that the Word, is present in this bread, which does not have yeast. The living element in this bread is the Word, is the human nature of Jesus and his divine nature. It's there present in this element of flour and water, and giving it life by his very presence, unlike regular bread, like leavened bread, with that yeast that is alive. And then, let's see, where does the Pope, the Pope talks about the ultimate element in reality, the Blessed Trinity. So he's gone from our experience of creation to our experience of enjoying creation with a community and with the body politic and civic. Then he goes to the sacraments, that the creation is a sacramental, and then he goes to the Eucharist, and now he comes to the Trinity. The Trinity, all of creation, is an image of the Trinity. When you think of it, if God is the creator, the only thing he knows is himself. So creation is going to be an image of himself. So creation is all made up of relationship. The Trinity is relationship. relationship. Everything is in relationship to the other. Now, when you think about it, isn't that what the Big Bang was? The Big Bang was from this subatomic particle, this Big Bang, and all things proceeded from the other, and it is in relationship to the other. It is an image of the Blessed Trinity. Everything in that subatomic particle from which it all started was completely known by God, and everything that came into being was known by God. All of this being of creation, all of these elements are in God. The whole of this marvelous creation that the Pope is talking about is all in God. All this whole economic system is in the most blessed Trinity. And that's why it is so precious that and in this creation of God is our home. So therefore we should take care of it, and we should be with stewards of this home, and we should live in it with great joy and happiness and an awareness. Now, there are a few other very, very interesting things that he says. He says, come into contact with every little thing that you look at, and look at it, and really see it, and be present to it. And then when you're talking to somebody, look at them, and don't be thinking of what comes next. Now, isn't that what we do most of the time? I'm talking to you, but heck, if I stop talking to you for a few minutes, I can find somebody much better to talk to over there. You know? Isn't that what we do? When we were kids, you go on a date or you go to a dance, and you're out there on the dance floor, and you're in high school, and you've chosen this girl, and you're out there dancing. But while you're dancing with her, you're thinking, oh, if I dance with that, it would be much better if I went and danced with that other girl. So we were thinking of what we're going to do next. Isn't that, I mean, for the Pope to make a point of this, I think is genius, you know, because that's our experience. And frequently, if it isn't that, then we're thinking about our bills. I'm talking to you about, I'm talking to you, but at the same time I'm talking to you, I'm thinking, now, I got to pay that gas bill, I got to do this, I got to do that. At the same time that I'm talking to you. So he says, when you're talking to somebody, don't be thinking of something else. I think that's marvelous. And then when he's talking about the sacraments, he says, you know, that the water that baptizes the little baby, it's water, but now it's being used to wash and give new life to this little baby. And of course, the bread is being used to nourish us and to make present this divine word. And all the seven sacraments. And then he says, the hand that blesses us. And we walk away after being blessed. I mean, he has given us life by this blessing. I am extremely, extremely impressed with this part of the encyclical. I think it's precious, and it's I just covered the surface, but there is order to it. Remember, this man is a Jesuit. He's got a brilliant education. So poetry and literature and music and all these elements that are part of a well-rounded education are part of this man's life. And so in this encyclical, it's all present there. His appreciation and his experience of all these elements of human life are there in this encyclical. It's absolutely magnificent. And yeah, it is a joy to share that